Give us an introduction, Kyle.
Okay, a one, a two, a 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, welcome to Fighting Words. I am Kyle the Fluffy Barbarian and Jonathan the Bard, and we have here today the one, the only, Anthony Buonomo from Austin, Texas. Say hi, Anthony.
How's it going, guys?
We're doing pretty good, as well as we can. So, for people new to the podcast, today we are going to be talking with Anthony about Weird Open, different types of training to get ready for Weird Opening. So hopefully that will be back to the tournament scene pretty soon. And then different projects and goals that Anthony has lined up for us. So, Anthony, how are you doing?
You know, it's a beautiful day. We had a nice thunderstorm roll through in the morning and sun came out. Let's do it.
All right, sounds good. So to introduce people in my own way to Anthony, Anthony is a tournament aficionado. I've fought with him and against him at such tournaments as Bro, Gesellfechten, Krumpau, and Schwarzkampf. I've been doing knife fighting for almost a decade, and the SOB beat me at knife fighting.
Guess how long I've been doing knife fighting?
Never. So, Anthony, it's great to have you on today, and we cannot wait to talk about competition with you.
So I'm going to jump in and go ahead and go right for the first question. Since this is about the competitive scene in HEMA, and we're trying to talk about tournaments specifically, you're here to talk about Weird Open, since you're the weird guy.
I'm definitely the weird guy.
Yeah, no, I think my inflection was the correct one, but I like yours better. So I want to give you a chance to start off by, in your own words and with your own emphasis, before we ask questions about it, tell us about Weird Open. How would you describe it if you had an elevator speech for it? What's going to describe the philosophy of it, and then just start talking about
it? Elevator speech, I've got a one-liner instead. It is what you want when you think of a sleepover sword party. And that in its heart is kind of what I wanted the event to be from the get-go. My big thing when I go to an event, I don't want to have to think about anything else. I want to go to a place, food's taken care of, sleeping arrangements are taken care of, everything's done, and we're very fortunate. We found a great venue. It's an indoor soccer field down in deep South Austin. And turf field's got rubber bits in it for throwing, moving, grappling, anything like that. But the main takeaway is you show up, we'll take care of lodging, we'll take care of food, snacks, drinks, everything like that. You show up, you fight, you have a good time, hang out with your friends, hopefully make some new friends, and of course, lots of fighting. And that, in a nutshell, is kind of my vision of what I want Weird to be and what I want Weird to remain.
So talk to me real quick before we jump on to the specific rules and reasons. Why that? What was it that made that the focus you wanted for Weird?
I mean, even though I'm not actually a Southerner, I'm now in the South, and it's all about hospitality. It's all about taking care of people, taking care of friends, and being a good host. So we're having people come 7, 8, even 10 hours away to come to this event. I want to make sure that they have an amazing time and there's no question marks. Like Kyle's mentioned, I've done a bunch of traveling for events to teach, to do other things like that. And it's always this whole production of, okay, so I want to go to this event. I need to figure out how I'm going to get there. Then I need to figure out where I'm going to stay. I need to figure out what I'm going to do for food. And there's less ability for myself to focus on the event of what I want to do. Like, I'm not going up to Seattle, say, to, travel Seattle and check out restaurants, everything else like that. When I'm going to Seattle for HEMA, I'm going to Seattle to fight and do HEMA. So having to, and I know this is unrealistic, having to leave the venue at all is taking away from my ability to do what I want to do when I'm at an event. So by having a venue or an event where you're able to stay there the entire time, you can set up, if you so choose, obviously you're able to leave and find lodging elsewhere. But being able to just show up and immerse yourself in a weekend of HEMA is kind of what I want to do when I go to events. I don't want to get bogged down like, oh, well, it's 5 o'clock, they're kicking us out, I guess I need to find food somewhere. Who do I know and who do I want to go find food with? Like, if you can just stay in the venue, you can do whatever you want the entire time. And it's a much more welcoming, much more inviting way of hosting and doing events.
Yeah. See, this is why it's the best part about the Southern League is it's like the first event of the year. And we, every time we have even newlings who have only been coming for a few months, we even say, dude, just go to this event. It's priced really well. It's all inclusive. And the best part is that it's a really safe, fun event for people to have their first tournament experience.
Well, and not to just be bills for, Weird Open, but that was my first event. It was my first out-of-town tournament, and I credit it for my fervor for out-of-town tournaments now because it was such a positive experience. I mean, I would say you succeeded in that. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I said that's the other half. I know you're going to ask the question later. That's kind of why I also made the event run the way it does, why I focused on single exchanges and multiple weapons and kind of do whatever you want to get, whatever you want to get out of it. So you can kind of have that easily scaling up to meet whatever demands and wants people have.
Well, okay, let's go ahead and transition into that then, because that would be my one critique I would have had. I'm trying to think back to newbie Jonathan fighting in Austin against people I'd never met for the first time. And the complaint I had the first time was the single exchanges. That was what did not feel newbie friendly to me at the time. Obviously, I have opinions that have morphed and changed now, but trying to think back to that context, I was a newbie. It was my first tournament, or that wasn't, with my people in my city.
Right.
I didn't like that. That didn't work for me. So what was your reasoning?
So there's a couple avenues to look at for a single exchange in general. One of my biggest things is, say you're not Kyle and you go to an event and you get your fairly traditional at this point for, I'd say at least 2/3, probably more of HEMA tournaments is you get a pool of 5, you get your 4 fights. And if you only win 2, you're done fighting for the weekend. Right. So that's one of my big pet peeves about tournaments in general, and why I don't want to say new people shouldn't go to them, but it's really disheartening to, spend easily $200, probably closer to $400, depending on where you're going for an event.
How much work you take off. Yeah.
Yeah. And get 4 fights and then you're done. And because it's a big tournament, no one's doing pickups, and people who lost are in a bad mood, so they don't want to do free play afterward. And it just really takes away from the atmosphere. So by having single exchanges, it kind of forces people to get that 8 or 9 bouts. And yes, they're only single exchange bouts, but most of those aren't the first clash of a 10-round fight. They're much deeper, much more provoking of like, okay, in and out, because this is it. You get one shot to prove yourself, defend yourself, best your opponent, however you want to phrase that in your head. But because you only get that one shot, the stakes are definitely higher. They definitely feel higher. And I'll acknowledge that does make it a bit more stressful on the new folk if they're competing, but it makes the whole tournament feel better overall. Because I'll take the flip side of that, and I'll pick on myself. Baton Rouge Open, 17, 18, one of those, where they didn't have a point cap, they didn't have a mercy limit. So it's one of those, you need to keep hitting the other person so you have a chance to seed high in the finals. But then I'm beating on this newling who has, been holding a sword for 3 months, and that feels terrible too for both sides of the equation. So by taking those heavy-handed, terrible, one-sided, lopsided mismatches out of the equation, you're able to have a much more balance. So yes, Kyle may have to beat on the new person who's been fighting for 2 months, but it's one exchange.
Yep.
And Kyle hitting them is, generally speaking, inevitable, but he doesn't need to do it 15 times in a row to make sure he can do well in the tournament.
Yeah, because a lot of times, whenever we have like a Nordic rule style, or like multiple exchanges have to be done till there's no point limit, you have to keep just going. And speaking from a psychological point of view, if you're a sports person and you walk into the ring and you just get waylaid one terrible time by like me, Derek, anybody that's a high level competitor, you take that into you with the next fight. So this whole event turns into one giant mental in the head, and now you're sitting here going like, I don't want to compete anymore. Versus I walk out there and like, bing, oh wow, that guy got me really good.
I didn't even see what happened. Oh well, I'll try again next time.
Yep. We'll go ask that guy what he did.
What would your answer be to the critique that it doesn't show off art and skill quite as well? If you have 3 to 5 exchanges, you get a chance to actually play some more, or some deeper, I should say, tactical games, perhaps, would be the argument that I have heard and have made, just to be honest.
No,
as
totally
opposed to, there's a lot of times that it feels like on a single exchange and that's all you're doing, there's not quite as much tactics or art in it, and the a lucky shot can play a lot more into it. What would be your response to that?
I mean, if you're getting taken out by a lucky shot, you need to increase your skill and art so that doesn't happen to you.
Right at me. I see how you are, Anthony.
Let me get the fucking med kit for that. Damn.
That's my first answer. And I mean, that's definitely a valid criticism that there is a niceness to our sport where we get to kind of play each other out, feel each other out a little bit. And I guess my counterpoint is I'm arguing this is the martial side of things. We always say this is a martial art. We're trying to do this martially and safely and sound. And if you get hit in the hands because you're trying to feel out and get a deeper attack, you messed up way in the beginning, and you shouldn't be allowed to get a redo on that because you should protect your hands better.
Right.
So yes, there is a potential to have those exchanges cut short. I'm using that in quotes because that's not what happened, right? You got hit.
Yeah.
Or you hit the other person in the hands. And I'll call this out on myself. There was in Sword and Buckler in SoCal in February. Feels like years ago at this point.
Yeah. 20, man.
There was an exchange, and the judge man said with other fencers, not myself, said, "Man, that was a really pretty Sword and Buckler exchange." Like, I told him, no, that was ugly. They weren't doing anything they were supposed to be doing. So it looked pretty because stuff happened, but they weren't doing Sword and Buckler. Mm-hmm. And then I fought one of those guys, and I remember 5 or 6 exchanges. I don't remember what the rule set of point was anymore because I don't pay attention to that. But he was sitting like this the whole time. Here, let me get so you can see my hands.
Oh, Jesus
so,
yeah.
So first 3 strikes were to the sword hand because he didn't move. So then, I should turn this over. Next strike was the buckler hand. He fixed it, and I hit the sword hand again. I think we were done. Like, that is not good fencing. You can get good fencing if you don't take those shallow, dirty targets. But if we're looking at this from a martial perspective, which is how I like to at least pretend I train and think about my exchanges. Like, I don't want to it was only a minor cut to the shoulder. Like, no, that's bad. I don't want that. So the extra chances are nice to get deeper, prettier technique. But if we're looking to test ourselves, and that's what I want my event to be, is a way to test yourself, to check yourself of, you've got 30 seconds or however long. I think we never actually enforced a time limit because we've never gotten there. There's been maybe half a dozen fights out of the dozens, 80-ish around that push that 30-second limit, but the other ones are in the 10-second range, so it doesn't even matter.
I think in the instructors bracket we had this year, me and Garrett Rivera were the only people who have ever pushed a time limit because our side sword rapier bout just wouldn't end.
Yeah.
The bastard wouldn't die.
Yeah, absolutely. So the time limit's kind of there to kind of, hey, we're here to actually fight, don't just stare at each other, but it's never come up. And the times it has come up, it's definitely like they're not just staring at each other, so it doesn't matter. So that answered the question in the circuitous way enough.
Yeah, I mean, and it covers a lot of other things we wanted to talk about too, so that works out particularly well. The last thing I want to talk about specifically with Weird, before we move on, is again maybe an elevator speech or something like that. But if you were talking to somebody from outside of our league, somebody who is not familiar with Weird Open as a concept or with your school or anything like that, how would you describe what to expect if they're traveling across the country to come to Weird as their first shuffle event? What would you tell them to expect?
I mean, again, I'm not gonna answer the question you want to answer, but I'm gonna give you the question I want to answer instead.
Okay.
So I would tell them expect an amazing time full of tough but fair competition with some of the most honorable and honest competitors you're ever going to run into. Which doesn't actually tell them anything about the event.
No, it really doesn't.
So I said, I'm not going to answer the question I know you wanted me to answer. but I'll give that. And then to kind of address the questions I've been ignoring.
Okay.
So weird, I definitely posit and promote as a best all-around fighter type of event, right? So we have all of our fighting is done on Saturday in one day. People can show up on Friday, camp out if they want. They can show up Saturday morning, whatever makes them happiest, whatever works with their life and timeline. Like, I'm not gonna say, oh, you didn't show up on time, you can't fight. It's get there when you can, get there when you need to. Just don't miss your event. But the conceit of this is that it's large pools of 10 to 12. It's all single exchange, and each round of pools takes an hour. We ran into small issues last year. We fixed it. We'll deal with it again in 2022 because we're not planning it in for this upcoming January. But the conceit is there's 4 weapons, and you can choose 3 of them to fight in, and whoever ranks the best across all weapons is kind of crowned the overall winner of the event, right? There's no, and I always joke about it, like, hey, congratulations, you're awesome at longsword, but you can't use any other weapons, so who really cares, right? We're looking to kind of find the best, best of all trades, right? King of all trades, even, not even a jack, right? We're looking for someone who's excellent and excels with all weapons, so they can pick up something that they've got either lots of training in, which they have the time and ability, great, or moderate training but can still place well. That's what we're looking for. That's what we want to see, and that comes from how I've structured the school. Right, we are intentionally labeled as a weapons guild. We're not focusing on longsword or anything else, but half of our back when we had classes, half of our classes were what I call our mixed. Right. We're called mixed weapons classes, where we focus on wrestling, dagger, sword in one hand, which is generally coming from Dusak, and then longsword. And the goal of each class is kind of take a concept or idea and tie it through 2, if not 3 of those weapons, and kind of show look, you can use the same exact footwork to do this thing in dagger, to do this thing in single sword, to do this thing in longsword, and just learning those minor adjustments you need to make. But you can start using those concepts to inform your fighting overall, your fencing overall. So my conceit is that if I get really good at Dusak, I'm going to learn things from Dusak that I should be able to apply to not only longsword, but to anything else I pick up and try to do, even down to wrestling. Right. And kind of playing with those ideas.
And I like the idea of being a well-rounded martial artist and being kind of a Renaissance man, if I'm going to be tongue-in-cheek about the whole thing, because when we look at kind of the Renaissance masters and some of the masters that we try to emulate, they weren't a one-trick pony. This guy, the ones we really respect and have the most kind of play in the society that we have, are these guys like Joachim Meyer. Like, how many weapons are in his book? We look at the, the Wallerstein Codex and the Nuremberg groups. They are multiple weapon systems, and once you start studying enough of them, you do notice that there's overlap. So yes, if I learn Dusak, I should be able to use it with side sword. If I use it with side sword, there's things from side sword I can also use with rapier or dagger, and the footwork and the long sword, and everything just kind of encompasses itself. And I love that your event points that out, because instead of going, you are king of longsword, and longsword becomes like the beauty pageant and everything else is the ugly duckling. Right. Instead, it's like, well, great, you got first here, I got third, but I also got third in all these other events, so I'm actually the most well-rounded guy here. So it's like, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Well, and from a lower level, personal experience story there too. My experience at Weird was phenomenal in the sense that my longsword performance my first year at Weird was abysmal. There's no other word for it. And I ended my pools depressed, quite literally. It was upsetting to me that I did so poorly. Yes, you're laughing because you're familiar with my ego in that way. But then I came back that afternoon, I fought dagger, and I did well. And the tone and culture of the event you ran that year didn't make me feel like my longsword defeats were debilitating in that way. The dagger tournament held as much weight as the longsword tournament in the tone of the event. And that was, I wasn't in the running for best overall by any means, but I was able to feel good about my performance in the other system in an equal amount.
Yeah, because it's not the sideshow done Sunday morning off in the back basketball court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of times other weapons get relegated because we all want to be the king of longsword because it was, back in the day, the joust was the king sport and everyone wanted to be the best at it. They didn't care about the side events nearly as much. And I think one of the best things, if I'm going to yet again praise the rule set of the single exchange, is if you do lose or you compete in another weapon system, you are not so exhausted that you cannot compete well in the other ones. I have literally gone to tournaments, like at Schwertkampf, where it's like, holy Jesus God, why did I sign up for 3 events? I'm going to die.
Yep. The air didn't help, though.
Yeah. Warning to everyone, Schwertkampf you should go to. We're going to interview them, but it is in the mountains. It is taller than Denver, Colorado.
I got winded just talking and teaching my sword and buckler class.
Yeah.
Like that's
hours.
That's how bad it was. It's like, hold on, guys. I need to stop talking, I guess. I don't know what.
Yeah, I got winded sprinting over to the bathroom. I was like, oh, I'm gonna die. Am I sick? And they're like, oh no, we're 30,000 plus feet in the air. And I'm like, you bastards. And welcome back from commercials. So now let's get into tournament mindset. If I'm going to go to Weird Open, what are some things I need to do to prepare myself for the event? Go.
One of the first things I was going to say, you kind of negated, but make sure you can fight all day. So that's not just the exhaustion, right? Like we said, it's not going to be this grueling, like, all right, I've got to do 1,000 fights in the morning, another 1,000 fights at night. It's going to be a lot of exchanges, but they are single exchanges. The thing that will sneak up on you is because, like I mentioned earlier, there's all this pressure on that single exchange. Your adrenaline is going to be much higher than you used to for most events you've done in the past. So even if you're familiar with fighting and engaging in a tournament, there's definitely a mental tax that gets engaged because, like I said, you're getting 9 exchanges in the first hour. If we do a second round of exchanges, that's another 8 or 9. Mm-hmm. But you've got all this extra adrenaline dump of, I get one shot at this. So if you're the type of person who's going to get intense and wired into an event like that, then having that practice of like, okay, this needs to happen, and getting yourself used to that adrenaline spike to deal with that kind of thing is a kind of unexpected trade-off I've seen. And most obviously is playing with multiple weapons. If you want to go and take home the crown jewel and get like top 3 in 3 of the 4 events, or the 3 events you're allowed to compete in, you're going to need a lot of practice in those other weapons and just being able to apply those weapon mindsets more rapidly.
Okay. So what are some exercises that I would want to do to be ready for that?
I mean, I don't have any good exercises because it's just class. You should be doing this on I'm not going to say daily basis, but weekly basis. You should be picking up 3 or 4 different weapons, practicing just flow drills and movement, and starting to find, one of my big things I talk about is finding the way you want to move and the way you want to fight. I look at the effect books as giving us guidelines or concepts or ideas or things to apply, but the when and the what they give is very narrow, and I feel like that should be applied more across the board. So they give you an example of a technique and a concept and how to do it. It's up to us to interpret it and make it our own and be able to apply it as it's happening on the move, on the fly. So then you're taking that and then multiplying that by, ideally half a dozen different weapons. You can pick up, 4 I mentioned, pick up quarterstaff or, montante, sword and buckler, anything like that. And all of a sudden you've got this holistic body system that's kind of influencing everything how you do. Mm-hmm. But the short answer, the easy thing to do is just, shadow boxes of different styles of weapons multiple times a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a bit of a sprint, yet at the same time it's a setup, bang. Okay, go back to your point, calm yourself down, and then you're going to do that again. But you're going to do it 8 times, which is different than a 3 to 5 man pool where it's you got 2 to 3 minutes to try to get to 15 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like with the and I guess the other thing, like if you've got the partner, is, you know, always compete. Like, you know, if you're doing multiple exchanges, one of my rules of thumb is if you're doing 10 exchanges with somebody, pick 3 that you have to win at all costs, right? Mm-hmm. So the other 7 should be fairly relaxed or technique focused or whatever, but it's like, all right, this one, this is for real. I was walking down the alley and Jonathan jumped out in front of me with his longsword ready. This is it. And I need to fight this one. You should be fighting that one vastly differently than the other exchanges in your free play and your training, just because it's going to give you that focus, that imperative, like this one's the real one, this one's important. Mm-hmm. And it's also going to let you play a little bit more with the other exchanges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that as a mentality, because a lot of times people go in with that as the default, like I have to win this exchange every single time, versus we play for a little while and it's like, okay, this one, I gotta beat him.
Picking your moment.
Yeah, pick your moment. Yeah, I like that. Sense. Yeah. If we were training, so like I was one of your students, what would I be looking at for training for multiple weapons? Should I train multiple weapons in a day, in a single hour? What would that look like?
So I said we had 2 types of classes. We have a mixed weapons class, which kind of just runs a gamut, and we even break that down more into, we had 5 types of classes that we did basically 5-week chunks of each. We had the 4 main were structure, distance, timing, and fight mentality, which is just an easy way to talk about Vornok and Indes and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So we'd have 5 weeks of one of those, then we do a week of structure. Yeah. 5 weeks, another one of those, another week of structure. So everything's coming back. So as I said, when we're training multiple weapons, it's not so much that we're sitting there like, okay, here's the Dusac manual, and here's the plunge cut, and here's the winding cut, and the blend cut, and all that other, like, it would be just like, cool, here's a concept from longsword, you know, going out into like long point basically. So we have a long point like in Dusac, we'll count out straight parry. What can I do from the straight parry? And how can I do these same motions from a straight parry with a longsword or with a dagger or out of wrestling even? And that's how I really train multiple weapons, is that, yes, we have call out breakout classes for each of those. There's a longsword class, there's a Dusac class, there's dagger class, there's wrestling class, all that. But the way it all ties together is those mixed weapons classes, where we just take a symbol footwork, whether it's just like a compass step, Zverkow type motion, and how can we do that same motion with a Dusac? What does that look like? What does that mean? What does that do? And kind of breaking down that way. So again, for me, it's less about studying and being the master of, you know, all 17 techniques of longsword, and then going through Dusac with Meyer and being great at all 10 or 12 of his cuts, and then his 18 guards, and then picking up dagger and being able to do all the cool throws out of the other books. And like, it's not about that. It's about, how do I train myself to move as a martial artist, move as someone who trains and fights with weapons, and how can I just now apply that to this other weapon I've never held before, or that I've got limited experience with. Well, if I know I can do this, this, and this, you know, if I give someone a quarterstaff, and we've spent like the last week and a half talking about how to take, you know, single sword techniques up to longsword, I would really hope they could do the same thing with quarterstaff after they started playing with it for 10 minutes of feeling how the weapon moves.
Right. And go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. I'm particularly impressed. It's kind of fun to sit here and listen, honestly, because I feel like every question we ask you, you bring back to philosophy and training, which I think is really cool. As a teacher by profession, like I am reacting to this, like all of my teacher lights are lighting up, because this is cool. I think that's really interesting that your focus seems to be, and correct me if I'm interpreting you incorrectly, but your focus seems to be from this baseline of, we want to think as a whole all-around fighter, we want to train and focus on good art. And you seem to feel like the tournament stuff, both your rule set and your suggestions for strategy, just kind of flow from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that I designed the tournament around my mindset, at least not consciously. I won't say like what happens in the darker recesses of my brain. That's a Kyle question. We can talk about that later.
We'll get to that in the next video, maybe, Kyle.
We need more booze for that one.
But I think both the tournament and my teaching philosophy came out of my idea that, like, it doesn't really matter if you can pull off the perfect shield how. right? If I give you 5 chances, you pull it off 3 times out of 5, great. Well, those other 2 times are what's going to get you killed, possibly literally, right? Again, if we're looking at it from the martial arts perspective. So, and then what happens, like, you're in a small alley, now your longsword's irrelevant, right? So being great at longsword, being able to nail that shield how 99% of the time, so great. Now you've really mastered one technique with one weapon, but what do you do with a rapier? What do you do with a quarterstaff?
Exactly. Yeah. Because if you look at it as these are attributes that I'm building within myself, I mean, an overhow with a long sword, with a side sword, with a dewsack, with a quarterstaff, all basically comes back to the same fundamental mechanics. And if you're building those, then it's just put a weapon in the hand. And, I always have a saying, like, a good martial artist walks into it, and if he needs to, he'll kill you with a rock. Like, it just comes down to, like, how am I winning the fight? Not like, what weapon am I using?
Which tools do I have in my hand right now? Mm-hmm. How am I best able to use them? Versus, cool, well, I've got this longsword, I can do this thing, but if I don't have that, what do I have?
Right. I mean, to be a weebo for a split second, Miyamoto Musashi in the Book of the Five Rings says, do not have a favorite sword. And that is very true. Like, if you just only train longsword and you never train anything else, you're missing out on the martial arts as a whole.
Well, he's even saying with that, like, if you only train with an Enzifer and someone hands you a Reginier,
you're not used to the balance and weight difference. Yeah.
So to take that from the microcosm and the philosophy, but make it a little bit wider, we'd like to hear you talk comparing Weird Open and other tournaments you've been at, to kind of give you a starting point. We're not necessarily asking you to go to the nitty gritty rule set differences or anything like that, but with this foundation of your philosophy being what it is, and as traveled and experienced as you clearly are, I don't know if our viewers are all going to know that, but you've been to a lot of places.
I've been fortunate enough to be able to go places and talk and teach and fight.
Yeah, so some really cool stuff. So can you talk for a few minutes about how you feel like your event and what you've attempted to create from your philosophy compares to other things you've done, other places you've been, and any category you want. It doesn't have to be philosophical. It can be about rule sets. It can be about things like that, culture, any of that. How do you feel like you line up?
Man, that's such a biased question to ask someone who runs an event. Like, how amazing is your event compared to other events you've been to? Now, be honest. I really think that we have a lot of potential to grow. I've been to SoCal Sword Fight twice now, and I'm always amazed how small their event feels despite being so large. So Weird, we generally cap at, I think, roughly 60 competitors. We might have 70 to 80 people tops showing up, all said and done. SoCal Sword Fight is easily 3 times that. And I'm sorry, RJ, if I get those numbers wrong and you're like 5 times that. But I know they have over 200 people there. Mm-hmm. And they fill up an entire, they've got a building probably about half again the size of ours. Obviously, they don't have the overnight camping at that size. But it still managed to feel like a very small and homely event. Like, you go to it and you think about it and like, man, I'm with all these people, everything's really close, everything's amazingly smoothly run and organized. And then you sit back and look like, wait, look at that opening photo. There's like 1,000 people there. Mm-hmm. It's like 200. And it's staggering to think how many people they siphon through their event in a positive way. I'm not saying we're just numbers in a machine to him, but their scale is incredible, and the smoothness event is incredible. And that's one of the things I've always refrained from, out of fear of, like, if I jumped it up to 80 competitors and actually market it. Because one of the things, like, I don't actually market my event outside of Shuffle. Mm-hmm. I know other people who have fan clubs that we won't name by name.
Josh. All right, just right to it. Okay.
He's always something like, yeah, come to my event, come to this event. Like, that's just who he is as a person. I'm not saying he's doing it to inflate his event's numbers. He just wants everyone to show up and everyone to be there. And I'm not that brave, not that courageous, where it's to be like, yeah, I want everyone and their brother to come out to my event, because like I don't know if I can hold an event that'll to my standard that'll have everyone and their brother in it. So that's one of my things is I'm almost afraid to grow. I'm afraid to expand and push more. I'm also really leery of coaching concerns. So one of the nice things, in my opinion, about a single exchange tournament, whether it's, and I haven't been up to it, but Effectual New York that Edelson did or does or might still run was single exchange. And one of the things that they did that definitely inspired me was like, if you don't know what happened or if it was messy or the judges or competitors didn't like the exchange, do it again. Instead of giving someone that bad taste in their mouth of like, you know, say it's a gold medal match and it's tied for the final exchange. Same rule set as we have at the end, right? Final exchange is a tie score, next clean point wins. Well, you get a lot more ugliness happening in those events, or if someone doesn't see what happens, they can't decide, oh, that one exchange didn't count, but the other 7 did. Mm-hmm. We have that luxury of saying, okay, well, no one really liked what happened, so we're going to throw it out and do it again. Mm-hmm. Or like, that was probably a double, but I want to call a double and upset someone, so we're going to throw it out. Mm-hmm. And we have that luxury, that power with a single exchange event that allows us to kind of get away with a little bit more.
Right.
But the caveat to that is you need, higher caliber judges because, like you said, you don't have the extra rounds to make up a bad call or a misplaced call. So things like that. One of the other things I really enjoy that we're able to do and other shuffle events do that most national events tend to not, I might be mistaken on that, but is fighter input on the calls, right? Shuffle as a whole tends to favor this of like, I can call a strike against myself. I can say my opponent's strike wasn't good enough. Sorry, I can say my strike on my opponent wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, you're about to get correction from both of us here.
Making me talk a lot. So having the ability to have those inputs, and in the case of my event, especially, like let them be kind of primary to the point of almost overriding judges, where if the judges and the fighters disagree, then we just fight the exchange again. Is I think a really powerful tool and makes us not only better fighters but better people.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely agree with that because the problem I have whenever I travel to tournaments where it's like the fighters have no say is you kind of feel jilted whenever it's like, okay, I cleanly hit him in the head and he's going like this and the judges are like giving him the point because he like grazed my arm and I cracked his skull and he's over there like holding his head and he's like, I don't understand. It's like, hey, judge, can I? And they're like, nope, no input. We don't want to hear it from you. And it's like, well, I feel kind of ripped off here. Like, does my say as a fighter and as a competitor, like I'm saying and he's saying, and they're like, nope, we don't have a rule system for that set up, so we're just going to ignore it. I'm like,
one of my favorite examples of this, I'll say the weapon. It was a rapier fight, and someone got stabbed hard in the chest. And he goes, "Oh man, nice shot." And he goes, "Oh, I can't say that because there was no fighter input allowed." So even like a super ingrained habit of ours of like, yeah, that was great, good job. Yeah. You can't say that now. You can't congratulate your opponent like mid-fight, like, man, that's a beautiful shot, good job, because then you're getting a penalty for influencing the judges.
Yeah. Well, and I think anytime you codify rule sets, and this isn't HEMA specific, but whenever you codify rule sets, you're taking away a certain amount of flexibility in a scenario. That's, right. It's for the purpose of judging, or it's for the purpose of quantifying what needs to win, and that's fine. But I think what we're dancing around here is the difference between balancing on the side of that rigidity, where the rules are very clear, very clean cut, and there's not a lot of wiggle room, and balancing the other direction, which is too loose, nobody knowing what happened. And finding a sweet spot in the middle is, of course, critical. And I do appreciate. I mean, obviously, we're part of Shuffle up here too in Oklahoma City. Having that fighter input, I think, is a key element.
Yeah, and then kind of tying into that, because I've been running this shuffle rule set for I think 2 years now, or the weird rule set for 2 years now, and some other fun stuff before I kind of really honed in on this. And one of the things I like about our league is that, I mean, first of all, we're a league kind of in name only, and I say it in a nice way, is that we don't rank fighters and say like, yep, you're first in longsword, you're first in whatever this, and like it was fun for a little while, but then it got kind of boring. Like, I don't go to events to like get a trophy to take home. Like, I don't go for events to shine. I go to see people like you guys, right? I love the shuffle community. I love our family. But to trade ideas and to spar and to fight and do things, and like, yes, the tournament's a nice excuse to do that. But for me, I have way more fun in the free play afterward, or the after party, or whatever else is going on, and hanging out with people and socializing than the tournament itself. Like, even if I'm winning or medaling or whatever, the camaraderie before and after is way more important to me than the actual tournament.
Yeah. Do you think that your rule set specifically, maybe the attitude of shuffle, contributes to that and has more of that attitude in our events than other places you've traveled to?
No, there's definitely a lot of camaraderie at the other schools and other places I've been to. I will say, in some places, being the outsider, I didn't really get to feel it the same way because I didn't have that strong bond and I wasn't like ushered into the crowd the same way. And that's definitely part of me as a personality type, where I'm not going to be like, hey, I'm Anthony, how are you guys doing? You should let me hang out with you kind of personality. And I'm more happy to sit at the sidelines and kind of watch and observe and participate when I feel I have valuable input versus just kind of forcing my way into things. But I definitely see a lot of that same camaraderie. I see lots of events have the big after party Sunday nights and things like that. Yeah. And it's definitely nice to see that culture kind of permeating more.
That makes sense.
Right. That way, sometimes we go to events and you can always tell the person who this is here on a mission. His goal is gold and he is straight line to that. And that is all. And then after they're done, they pack up and basically they're gone. And it's just like, okay, I'm kind of half in his mind. Whenever I'm fighting. And afterwards, it's party time. We're just going to hang out, exchange knowledge, talk about the newest thing we're working on. Hey, I've been working on Zverkow out of this manual, and there's some little differences in it. And it's like, oh, sweet, tell me about that. And then like for 2 or 3 hours after an event, we're screwing around, fighting in our underwear, doing all sorts of fun stuff. Because
can confirm the after parties at Weird
are
weird.
Wonderful. I love it. And it's nice because you go there, you eat pizza, and you just have a good time with life. And it's not such a super serious event. So
let's segue into specifically give you a chance to shout out some of the things you've traveled to and seen that are different. I mean, obviously the three of us, our perspective is pretty Southern Historical Fencing League focused. That's our primary experience. But you've had a lot of experience outside of that. So can you take just a couple of minutes and shout out a couple of things that you've seen specifically in other places that you really like?
One of my favorite, and this is definitely because I had the teacher VIP experience, was up at IGX, the IMDA exhibition in Boston. And they rented us a Airbnb for all the instructors. So yeah,
nice.
At night, there's right, enough said, that alone. But yeah, just being able to hang out with all the instructors and change ideas and trade ideas and stay up way too late talking about ridiculous things was amazing. They did a really nice after party as well, at a Italian restaurant, I think. I don't know. I'm not big on those details, but I just remember like afterward, we all went to a restaurant, hung out. Everyone was there in the same room together, wandering around. That was a lot of fun. I already shouted out to SoCal Sword Fight. They run a really solid event, very smooth, great people. Definitely worth checking out. Sword Squatch was a lot of fun as well. They have, I think they did a brewery. I don't know if it was the final night or midnight or the middle night. But they rented out a brewery. Everyone got a couple of drink tickets, said food truck tickets, and same thing, just giant milling around kind of things. So
awesome. Now, one of the things I want to do is give you a chance, because if people don't know, Anthony is world renowned for his sword and buckler work and being a teacher, because a lot of these events you get to go to because you're teaching.
Right, absolutely.
When me and you went down to Mexico together and we were sitting there teaching, it's like taking a class with Anthony is wonderful, and if you are hosting an event in the near future, I would definitely recommend him. But I want to give Anthony a chance to talk about some of the things he's working on, goals for upcoming projects, all that stuff.
So I'm feel like I'm working harder now. So we've been, due to pandemic issues, shut down. We shut down for a few months in March and April. We had classes in June, and then we shut down again for state and everything else. So since July, I've been throwing up YouTube videos 3 nights a week. Half of those, actually most of them have been kind of just a live impromptu mini lessons, mini classes, ideas, concepts to run through. So if people have not seen that and like listening to me talk, those are up on YouTube.
Well, and I wanted to say those are excellent. I've been following those, and I've been enjoying them.
Thank you. I'm glad someone's watching them. I never know. That's
you got a fan, man. You got one fan at least.
It's for me. It's just screaming into the void, keeping myself honest, keeping myself sharp, and just kind of engaging and creating content for myself. And when things pick up again, hopefully I can say, hey, want to see some of my classes are like. I'm throwing these videos online. I promise my classes are a little bit better. Those are definitely fairly stream of consciousness. I have a loose idea of what I want to talk about, if that, and I just kind of jump down a rabbit hole and talk for 15 or 20 minutes, as the case has been lately. It's been getting longer. Obviously, 133 Sword and Buckler is by far my favorite. Going back to what I talked about before, it's definitely influenced a lot of my fighting pretty much across the board. How technical do you want me to get with this? Because I can go into a rabbit hole right now, or I can just leave it there. But that's something that I've been taking to a lot of events I've been going to. And the class I was planning on teaching this year, which I got to teach all of once before everything was shut down, was kind of taking the ideas of Sword and Buckler with the idea of the ward and the siege, and then Fabris, who talks about approaching resolution and always attacking your opponent, driving into your opponent, kind of combining those together and seeing how they kind of mesh and feed off each other. When we first started looking at Fabris a couple years ago, it was enlightening because Fabris is using all the words I wanted for Sword and Buckler without me knowing how to actually explain it. Like, I had intuitive concepts of what ward and siege meant and how to apply and how to do things. And Fabris, if you look at book 2 in his Art of Dueling, starts talking about this approaching resolution. This you always walk towards the opponent and aggress the opponent and kind of play off his reaction from there. And he starts going in different ways of doing that. And the vocabulary he has in there, as well as vocabulary just describing the different tempi of the feet and the hand, really mesh well with 133. And 133 I'd always kind of called jokingly proto-rapier, because it's all about get to center line and stab the other guy. Being able to take Fabris's vocabulary and apply it to that and better my understanding of it has helped immensely. And then the last third or so of the class, I kind of take those concepts we've talked about and bring them over to longsword. And this idea of, okay, so these guards, everyone knows they're not supposed to be static, but what does that actually mean and how do we apply those? And starting to think about guards not only as, the defensive starting positions, but places you move to as you're aggressing, as you're attacking the opponent, and then working off the reaction from there to see what actually happens to close distance in the fight. Yeah. So that's been one of my pet projects for the last year that I was hoping to teach more this year, which clearly doesn't get to happen.
All right. Well, I hope to see that online more, because I think as a martial arts community, one of the problems we run into, and I know I'm a perpetuator of this, is like we get stuck into camps where it's like, oh, these are the Fiorists over here, these are the Mayorites over there, oh, these are the Ringet guys over here, oh, this is the Marazzo group. But being able to, as a martial artist, be able to look at all these different systems and see the unifiers of what the martial arts are there, and then just how's this person a little different, and seeing the commonalities, I think makes us all better holistic martial artists.
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead. Don't want to interrupt you.
I would say, and then as for personal projects beyond that, I just started this past week putting out kind of a cover-to-cover Fabris. So basically starting at plate 21, which is the first wounding play once you're past all the guard descriptions, everything like that, and just doing a quick 3 to 5 minute video of here's the play, here's kind of our interpretation of why he's doing this, what he's actually explaining up, because that's one of the things Fabris doesn't do a lot of, at least in that book. He says, like, yeah, you wound this guy like this, and this is what happens. And he doesn't usually give a whole lot of, like, oh, what's the other guy thinking? Like, is the other guy just a dumb person who you just get to stab? Or does he have a martially sound principle that could work, but why doesn't it work, and things like that? So being able to kind of dissect those more fully to better understand the concepts of the rapier he's trying to highlight, I think is a useful tool, both for myself, because again, I probably can no longer say this, but I don't really do rapier. I'm familiar with it in passing, and I'm hoping for myself going through this will give me a better, deeper understanding of the rapier concept, which again, I can now pull back and apply to everything else I do. It's kind of my goal with that.
Yeah. I mean, there it is again. There's just the philosophy over and over again. As long as I have this concept, I can apply it to multiple weapons, like using the long point with a long sword, using the long point with a rapier, using it with the dewsack. Once I put it out there and I begin to approach the enemy, how does he react? Just like Fabrice with rapier whenever he starts to approach them. But the same thing goes for sword and buckler, because in 133, that's what you do. You siege their ward or their castle, and how they react is then how you kill them.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do want to point out to all of our viewers that we asked Anthony about personal things he wanted to plug, and he again talked about philosophy and teaching and how he thinks as a martial artist. And I want to point out that that's a consistent theme, and one of the reasons I was real excited to interview you for this podcast right at the beginning. I think that's cool. So, as a terrible segue, then, I know it's 2020, and the one thing we don't have is certainty on anything. But do you have any events coming up or places you're planning on being in the coming months or next year that you know of that you can plug?
No, I mean, as I said, we're not planning on Weird this year. It's going to be a quiet January, unfortunately.
That sucks.
I can't justify locking 40 or 60 people in a room.
Oh, man. I'm not judging the decision. I'm just sad.
Yeah, that's my baseline. It's like, okay, like I can kind of see something working, but like, no, we're all staying there overnight. That's not.
Breathing the same air.
Yeah.
Drinking from the same bottles. Wrestling in our underwear. You know, the normal things.
This means 2022 will be even better.
Yeah. I mean, I think when 2022 happens, I think we're going to have to call the cops on most events, because it's just going to get out of hand. So, well, Anthony, thank you for coming and talking to us. I hope this interview was everything you wanted it, because it was everything we wanted.
Yeah, this was super fun, man. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, it was a great time. Yeah. So thank you.
And I hope we can have you back on to go into a lot of detail with how you're combining different martial arts, and maybe being able to go down that rabbit hole with 133 and Fabrice, so that people can get more ideas how to do that on their own. So
yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
Anything else you want to add, or any questions for us before we call it?
That's all I can think of. So
okay,
I've got nothing else.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. This has been really cool, man.
And for all those who are watching, if you want to get a hold of Anthony Buonomo, you can go where?
HistoricalWeaponsGuild.com, on Facebook, on Instagram, HistoricalWeaponsGuild@gmail.com for email, any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. All active, being checked regularly.
Mm-hmm. And he responds pretty quickly on Facebook. So I'm Kyle Tully, and this is Jonathan Marshall, and this has been Fighting Words.